Welcome to my YouTube channel called Figuring Out the Ordinary. I'm so glad to have you on today, and we have quite an interesting topic for today. So, can you please just briefly introduce yourself and your background?
Yes, thank you, Mel. Hi, everyone. My name's Adil. I'm currently a master's student in physics, and I'm doing some research on artificial photosynthesis solar cells. So I like to be clean and green, and that's what I'm currently working on.
Okay. So, definitely want to get into what you're doing in your master's. But before you got into your master's, what made you decide to get into physics?
So when I was younger, I always knew I wanted to be a scientist. I just didn't know what kind of science I wanted to go into. So it was kind of difficult deciding. And at varsity level, I first went into biology, and it was actually the dean who suggested I should try looking into physics. So that's how I got into physics, actually.
Okay. And then with physics in undergraduate, we do know that it's a different ball game compared to school. So when you were studying undergrad physics, um, was it a shock for you, A? And then B, like what obstacles did you face in undergrad? And then did that make you think like, oh no, like I'm not going to pursue my dream of being a scientist anymore?
Yes, definitely. It was a shock for me. So the level of studying is completely different. The way you need to study is also very different and very independent. Um, I know it's also difficult to, get into varsity level in the first place. So it's a whole nother ball game. Everything is super fast paced. You don't know if you're coming or if you're going. And it can be really stressful and really taxing on the system. I know in second year, a lot of us were struggling with a lot of the modules, and the group was also very small. So we didn't have a lot of females in our classes. So it was also difficult to make friends on top of that. So for me personally, I think the aspect of struggling with friendships and then also like kind of going into a bit of a depression because you start to feel stupid or dumb because you think, oh no, I'm not doing as well as I thought I would be doing, or because maybe in high school you did really well and now you're not obtaining those same marks, and now it affects you mentally. So definitely, there was a few times when I thought, oh goodness, am I ever gonna get a degree? Will I ever pass this? But I think the important thing is to push through, to keep telling yourself why you got into it in the first place, to have a set goal in mind, and eventually you will come out on the other side.
That's fantastic. And so, what besides telling yourself what was the main aim of doing this degree, what did you do when you did feel depressed? Was there any tools that you used, like maybe meditation or journaling, that whoever's watching could maybe also use?
Yes, definitely. So I actually saw a psychologist because we're lucky enough at our university that we have free psychology sessions, and they did suggest journaling, and it really does help a lot. So a great technique is to write down what you're insecure about or what you're scared about or one of your insecurities, and then from that you have to say, okay, if I can list three things, okay, is this fear realistic? Why am I feeling this fear? And can I change it? Then, if you feel like you can change it or it's not realistic, then you kind of write counter arguments like, sure, I'm scared, but if I work harder, I can do better. Or perhaps I can go out and make new friends or something like that. So, definitely journaling helped. Also, being religious helps in that time, having something to cling on to other than just trying to study. And then also, definitely support from family. I think that's very important.
I think that's so nice that you mentioned that you went to psychologists, because I think there is still a bit of that stigma about going to a psychologist, that there's something wrong with you if you're going. There is still that reluctance from, it's like a 50-50, because I think now as the years are going by, I think mental health is becoming important and becoming aware, but you still do have that stigma against going to psychologists. So I think it's really important that you highlighted going to psychologists, because that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, just like how you go to a doctor because there's something physically wrong and you just need that mental help. And I think by you mentioning that, I think hopefully if there is someone who is not against, but has that stigma about there's something wrong going psychology, hopefully this will change their mind.
Yes, definitely. I know, I also forgot to mention, so in my third year of studying, I hit like a very big challenge. I struggled greatly with one of my modules. I think a lot of us struggled with that module. And I found myself stuck. I would pass all of my tutorials and my written assignments that I had a lot of time to do. But when it got to the exams and tests, it would be like my brain just didn't function. So at first I went to speak to the lecturers and the head of department also, because once again, it does affect you mentally. And I found that not everyone was the same level of understanding. It's like a lot of people are open to mental health issues, but they don't necessarily understand what it's all about or know how to deal with it. So that's very difficult, and definitely your psychologist can also give some tips on that and can even speak to those lecturers who don't necessarily know what to do with you. So at the end of the day, when I spoke to one person in particular, I got the feeling that they thought I was just being lazy, and that I didn't do well because I wasn't studying. So my father even told them, she is studying, she's putting in the hours, we don't know what's happening. So I actually then went to go see some specialists, and I found out that I'm actually prone to more artsy type of things rather than physics. I just have a bit of an interest in science, and that when I get a lot of stress, I get very high levels of anxiety. And so the one side of my brain shuts down, and that is ironically the side that controls like my dominant hand, my dominant ear, my dominant eye. And it was actually quite funny because in the test, I would find myself, I would change a minus into a plus sign, and then in the next step, I'll make it a minus sign again. And so obviously, if you've done it wrong once, you just lose all of the marks from there onwards. So basically, what I found through some tests and stuff is that as soon as I get a lot of anxiety, my percentage of human error goes up. So I found that out in my final year of studying, basically. And together with that, I had a very low dosage of ADHD. So, well, back in the day, it was called ADD, not ADHD. So it's that version. It's not the hyperactive version. So I didn't really know what to do because, I mean, most kids get told these things early on. But apparently, as I was just studying so hard all of the time, I used to be able to push through. Where now I kind of hit a wall and I didn't know what to do and I needed help. And it's really difficult asking for help, I have to say. Sorry.
No, it's
Yes,
okay.
so I think it's very difficult asking for help, but once you have, it's really life-changing. And I mean, my marks immediately improved. I went from barely passing to distinctions. So definitely asking for help, knowing when to, kind of get the right diagnoses or when to try and figure out. And I think personally, if you know something's wrong, inside, like just trust your guts and definitely seek help.
I think, like you said, like for some people, if you're lucky enough that, I think if the symptoms are very obvious, then you diagnose at a young age, or someone can be like, oh, you have depression or anxiety or etc. But I think for majority of us, I think the symptoms are so subtle that you think that you normal and fine, and you think like, okay, what's wrong with me? And then I think especially in varsity, because obviously it's more independent, as you said, I think it's very harsh in a sense that you're kind of based on your marks, like whether you're smart or not. Like I understand why the system, why it's in place, but like you said, you are capable. It's just that you had factors that you didn't know, and I also experienced something similar to that. And I think then, um, just like the lecturers around you just assume that you're not capable because you're getting this mark. But it also, I was reading this book on growth mindset by Carol Dweck, and it was quite a fascinating book, how they were discussing that you can learn anything. It's just the method that the approach that you need to learn something that needs to be different, and anything is possible, even if it does take longer. So I think we have the way we speak to ourselves and the way society has said, like, oh, you're smart if you get an answer within 2 seconds, or if you get a distinction. So I think that has, whether we realize or not, subconsciously we're saying if we don't get that distinction or we don't get that answer in 2 seconds, that we're not smart. And I think that needs to also change. And I think that's also what caused a lot of stress in school or varsity.
Yes, definitely. I don't know if you've ever heard of the YouTuber Elizabeth Phillips.
No.
Her channel is still quite new, but she does a lot of productivity stuff, and she's actually studying to be a medical doctor. And she recently took a year off from that because she also realized, am I doing the right thing? Am I going in the right direction and stuff? And she has quite a nice video on being a beginner, right? So being a beginner as a child is encouraged. If you want to do music, go do music. If you want to learn how to skateboard, cool, go skateboard. It's encouraged for children to learn new things. And as we grow older, I don't think it necessarily becomes more difficult, but it becomes more challenging. It's more frowned upon and judged. So, for example, right, if you, like you started a YouTube channel now, it's a scary thing because it's a whole new unknown world and you're not sure how your friends or how other people might perceive it. And it's actually very brave just to start something new, to try something new, to see yourself in a different light. And I think that's very important for us to remember as adults, for sure. And like you said, we sometimes go through these things and it feels like you're being judged, like you don't necessarily know how to do something or you're not smart enough. But the thing is, on the other side, if you really look at that person's capabilities and abilities, we all actually have much the same abilities. If you put your mind to it, I think you really, really can do anything you want to. And even if you take 10 years, it's taken me so long to realize that life is not a race. It's not, even if your friends are getting their degrees and you're still stuck behind, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, when you get that degree, when you've passed that module, you've done it by yourself, and you can still be proud of yourself, even if you didn't obtain a distinction, if you just barely passed.
I think that's so true. I think a lot of us do see everything as a race, and I think that's also that when you're in school, it's like, okay, what are you going to do after school? Then you're going to get a degree, then you're going to get a job. So I think that's the whole cycle at the end of the day. And I think it's more like a guideline what to do. And I think, yeah, like you said, when you see other friends progressing and you're still stuck on this, you do feel like, you, yeah, there's many thoughts depending on how you think, but maybe like you're incapable, that you're not good enough, etc., etc. But I think we all deal with, it's a race, especially now early 20s. And then I think as you get to your late 20s, you're like, oh, okay, like I don't know, for some reason in the early 20s you feel like you see 30 quicker than when you're in your late 20s. So that's that
Definitely.
race. And then when you look back, you're like, wow, there was actually a lot of time. You can still redo another degree if you want, or if you're able to. So, um, you got your undergrad degree. Um, so what was the progress of doing honors and masters, and how did you end up doing artificial photosynthesis?
Okay, so I've always been into, kind of the greener side of things, like trying to make the earth a better place for all. So I tried to figure out how I would combine my physics degree with that. The thing is, for postgraduate, you have to do a project. So if you don't choose something that you love, and you really love it, and you really, really love it, so that when your passion dies, you still will push through, then you're not going to finish your degree. So I actually went to some of the advisors in the department. I basically directly went to the solar cell advisor and asked her if I could please be in her group because I'm so interested in solar cells. So it was really easy for me to get into that. But postgrad wasn't much easier, unfortunately, than undergrad. I struggled a bit financially. I was working to pay for my studies. So it can be a little bit difficult also balancing time to do your work and then your studies, and then you might fall behind. And at the end of the day, you just feel lost. So that definitely was a problem in my honors year. And then in my master's years, I went through a very troubling year last year. A lot of people would say, no, it was due to COVID and all of these things. But for me, it was more than that. I had an ankle injury. So where I would normally go like walking or jogging to release my stress, I couldn't do that anymore. I was stuck in a moon boot and in a cast and was told I can't exercise basically for a year. And then I also lost all of my jobs because they were all in the entertainment industry. I lost my small business. So there's definitely always going to be challenges. Life is never going to stop throwing you challenges, whether it's COVID or whether it's not COVID. I think you just have to figure out how to push through, how to motivate yourself, because there's also no one who's going to be there to motivate you if you don't do it yourself.
That is true. We have to be our own heroes. And I think one thing that I've also learned from life, I think we always, especially when we look at other people, we always feel like they, from the outside, they probably have it easier. And you always feel like when you compare, like if you like all of us do, we compare ourselves to other people and we think that life should be easy. But then I think when you speak to more people and when you also on your own journey, you actually do realize that the part of life is challenges. So we're always going to have challenges. So we just need to become more resilient, more smarter. Like for example, with finances, you know that there might be times when money comes and goes, but you need to be disciplined with money in order to be financially savvy. So I think it's the same with challenges that you learn from it, you become a better person eventually, because in that moment it's like, oh my gosh, like why is this happening? But I think we all have our ups and downs, definitely. And I think I think it's harder to accept that as well, because I think we all expect that life is smooth, but that one is having that life, and why is my life hard? And then you realize, oh, we're all going through it. And I think that's also one of the reasons why I created this YouTube channel, is to show that we all do have ups and downs.
Yes, I definitely have to say I do enjoy that about your YouTube channel a lot. So some of the previous people who have been on here, I've had interactions with them, and I would have never guessed, the trouble that someone else is going through or the struggles that they're going through in that moment. I think a lot of the times, especially with social media, we just see the best of people. So you see someone and you think, oh, their life is great. It's always wonderful. They never have troubles. And you never actually get to know them on a one-on-one level. So in your mind, their life is just perfect, but it's not that way. Even the top students struggle, even the prettiest ones struggle, even everyone that has their struggles. Sure, it might not be on the same level, but we all have struggles. And I think something that I recently thought about was, there's a lot of people saying, oh, if you have this, then your life is better, or if you have that, then your life is better. But at the end of the day, we all suffer the same, whether you're rich or poor or in Europe or Asia or Africa, it doesn't matter where you are. If your mother dies, it's the same pain for everyone. No one is going to feel that pain less than someone else because they have something. So at the end of the day, it's also not necessarily about what you have or what you don't have. It's about more your mindset and how you can think about things and grow and learn through situations, definitely.
That's true. I think also what makes life more harder is our mindset. I think once we change our mindset, yes, there's still going to be challenges, it's still going to be frustrating, but it makes it a bit more easier. But back to your artificial photosynthesis. So we know like why you got into it and how you approached it. But for someone who's not into physics or doesn't understand it, what is artificial photosynthesis. So can you just explain that?
Yes, for sure. So artificial photosynthesis is exactly how the name sounds. It's basically a solar cell that functions in the way of a plant. So you still have light harvesting happening. So it harvests energy through the sunlight. And then in my case, it needs water to function. So at the end of the day, you'll get hydrogen from the water, which you then will use as a fuel. So hydrogen is already used as a biofuel in places like Europe and America, where they're mostly using it to fuel cars. And then as a byproduct, you'll actually get oxygen. So that's also very good.
Okay, so in my mind, like artificial photosynthesis. So it does. So what are you working with? It does it. Is it like does it look like a plant, or does it more look like a solar cell?
Okay, that's also a great question. So there's two different ways you can go about it. So personally, mine just looks like a solar cell, all right? So I have basically a substrate, which is the bottom of the solar cell. And then on top of that, I put hematite, which is more commonly known as rust. We always like to say in rust we trust because it's a cheap material and it has promising characteristics which could possibly used for solar cell applications. And then this little solar cell has to be submerged in water. So there's various ways you can do this. You can either put it in a container of water, with a clear front so that it can shine through, or I'm not sure if you've seen those water heating type of solar cells on roofs. I think maybe one day in future that will also be a possibility. And then there's also things like I think it's called solar tiles from Elon Musk, that also functions on a similar type of idea or on similar science. And then on the other hand, there's people who are now actually taking these solar cells and adding biomaterials. So they're adding bacteria. I know the one that is used is L-arginine is used to enhance the properties of the solar cells. So there's also things like the greenhouse. I think it's located in Germany, but it's somewhere in Europe, where the walls are literally made up of plant material. So these plant materials actually harvest the energy from the sun, and it then gets converted into electricity. I'm not exactly sure how that house completely functions, but it's definitely something great to look into.
That's quite interesting. I just had a random thought, like, as you said, you're working with the solar cells. So when you said something similar to roof, I don't know, I could be wrong, but it would be interesting, like, if you did have like solar cells on your roof that that you use for your house, and then while it rains, like as you said, with the solar cell using it has water, that it could also release oxygen and trap the carbon while it rains or something. That's, I don't know, maybe if I'm completely off from what you've said, but that would be quite interesting if it could do that. So with your master's, what is I know you said it's artificial photosynthesis, but what's the main aim of it? Did you have to create the solar cell, or are you studying how much oxygen it's releasing, or are you testing the material? So what is your main aim with the artificial photosynthesis?
Okay, so basically I'm making the solar cell myself. So I'm actually going into the labs and synthesizing them. And then I get to test their characterization. So how much light they absorb, if they are conductors or insulators, just some properties like that to kind of see would it make a good solar cell or not. And then we're also actually testing it in light and dark environments to see what the yield will be. So we're kind of doing an all-around test. Unfortunately, it's not yet commercially available, but it is based on the same type of principles as thin film solar cells, which are only now becoming commercially available.
Okay, so I know with physics, it is, especially in undergrad, it's all theory based, and then there is like some practicals, and then But you know, I don't know, it always feels like your practicals are still like different from your actual theory. So you said like obviously masters is a challenge. So how was it like when you had to first create your own solar cell? Were you given guidance, or you just had to like figure out like, okay, this is the theory I know, and then somehow try and figure out how to make it into application? So can you just walk us through that?
Yes, definitely. So it is a bit difficult starting masters. You feel like a baby, like you don't know much. You do get guidance. I was lucky enough to start projects in solar cells in my undergraduate degree. So I already had a bit of background knowledge. But generally, what happens is you get sent to read articles for 6 months on your subject so that you can kind of have a general bit of information about what's happening. And then your advisor or your supervisor will also kind of guide you through the process. So what I really appreciate about masters is, unlike in undergrad where you get given some or other practical and you have to complete that and that's the end of it, as you study further, you kind of get more freedom to do whatever you want to do in the lab. So you can discuss and say, well, I have this idea, I want to research this, and have talks with your supervisor and kind of let your mind go and do those projects. So you do get guidance. You do get kind of, it's not super strict guidance, I wouldn't say, but if you do get stuck or you don't know where to go, there's always someone who will help you or who can kind of help you in the lab think up ideas or explain how a certain instrument or machine works. So there is at least that, but it's much different from undergrad in the way that in undergrad you only study theory, or mostly. I feel like it's mostly theory and writing exams. You only get tested on what you've learned and what you can put down on paper. In masters, it's quite the opposite. You go into a lab, you do your experiments independently, which means you're in a laboratory alone, figuring out how to do these things. And at the end of the day, you write your thesis or your dissertation on what you've done, which is 60 to 200 pages on just the experiments that you've run. So there's no real learning theory and there's no real writing down anything you learn every day, which makes it a bit difficult. I know at the end of first year, or the first master's year, a lot of students feel so lost because you look back and there's nothing. If you've done a year of coursework, you look back and you see all of your textbooks, all of your books, and you can say, oh, I've learned that this year, I've studied that. In experimental physics, there's none of that. So you can't really look back. Maybe you have one book in which you made all of your notes of which experiments you did what day, but you learn a lot of practical experience, which is important not to forget that you are actually moving forward.
That is true. But it's very interesting. Basically, masters is more practical. That's what, yeah, than undergrad. So what would be your next step after masters?
So I'm actually looking at going into PhD, and I'm not sure in what yet. I have too many interests. So I've recently gotten interested in programming. So I've been doing quite a few courses in programming. There's a lot of free courses that the universities of South Africa regularly have that you can join in with, or just like Udemy courses, anything really I can find. So I'm looking at maybe combining a bit of that with the solar cells, or to just, completely stay in solar cells, but like branch out into a different region of solar cells. So perhaps not artificial photosynthesis, as that it has been what I've been doing for most of my undergrad and honors and master's years.
Who knows? Hopefully, you can commercialize your studies. That will be really fascinating, and I think also helping the environment. But just a bit more on the environment. Like, what made you decide to be passionate about the environment? Because I think a lot of people, they don't, yeah, they're not like environmentally conscious. And I think only now over the past few years, like I think more and more people are becoming environmentally conscious and seeing the effects of not being environmentally conscious. But you still do have people like who don't believe in the facts or figures, or like it's not my problem. So for those people who just are not environmentally conscious, like what would you tell them to why they should consider being environmentally conscious?
Yes, definitely. So, I think when we're little kids, we love being outside, right? Any chance you have, you're gonna go play outside, be on the grass, playing in the dirt, basically. And as you grow older, you lose that sense of self. So I see a lot of adults are just working office jobs. They barely ever go outside. And what I found interesting is one of the therapies that they gave me was to go outside for an hour without any technology. Just be with yourself outside in nature for an hour every day. And that really helped me feel a lot better. But on the other hand, if you do go outside a lot and you start noticing, because you're not on your phone or busy with something else, you start noticing, oh, there's always little pieces of paper on the ground or at the beaches, it's really bad for me because I really love the ocean. It's one of my favorite places to be. And I started noticing as I grew older, there's more and more pieces of glass and rubble in the sand on the beaches. And it's becoming a real problem every day. So yes, I know there are a lot of people who don't believe, that global warming is real or that anything's happening. But at the same time, I do feel like these people are slowly starting to see changes. Like with the fires in Australia, a lot of people actually realized, that there is something going on there. It's not just natural that there's fires breaking out all of a sudden. So yes, I do think that there are people who don't know. What I would personally tell them is to look around and to think about when they were young, how they saw the world, how they saw their opportunities, what they wanted in life, how they enjoyed nature, and what they would one day want to leave behind for the future generation. Would they want a future generation to grow up the same way they did, to have the freedoms they did, to see and experience the wildlife that they could? Or would they want to, keep forward in their ways? And maybe when your children grow up, there's not certain species or certain animals left. So that for me is like one of the big things. I think if you think about it that way, there's no way really to deny that you have to change your ways. And I think for a lot of people, it's also quite scary, like thinking about, oh, now I have to be environmentally friendly. I can't use a straw. I can't do this. I can't do that. And then a lot of people kind of lose momentum very quickly. So, I always say like making a small change is much better than doing nothing. So even if you just stop buying cool drink bottles that are plastic, try and go for the boxes. You're already making a large change. So every small little thing you do changes the earth. You don't have to do everything at once. Just start small.
That's definitely true. I think I lost my train of thought, but it was, yeah, you really say had a lot of good points. Because I think also for me, where I became, I think also one of the reasons I'm also environmentally conscious is I think also with growing up with nature, and I think you also realize like Earth gives us a lot. I think with even the things that we produce man-made, that's all still from nature. So Earth gives us quite a lot, and then we just like you know, like kind of like throwing back all the rubbish back on Earth, which is kind of unfair, and I think also harming the animals indirectly, which are just being part of nature. And I know my biology teacher always said that as humans, we always do everything too late. So, for example, if you feel like you getting a flu, you can feel the tingling in your throat, but you won't start taking the medication then. You'll only take it once you have like the proper symptoms and the cough and the nose. So I think it's the same with with being environmentally conscious. I think it's been happening for years. Even while we were growing up, there was still a lot of effects, but when we were growing up, it still wasn't. I think there was a small amount of people that are environmental conscious. Even now, that people are becoming more environmentally conscious, it's still a small. It's increasing, but it's still small compared to the if you want to think the whole population. So I think now there's And now I think we're becoming more environment conscious because now we're seeing more of the effects. But because before we didn't, we kind of like ignored it. So, and it's been over the years. And like you said, people can do small amounts just to change. Like they can just like stop using plastic bags for now when they go shopping. And then once they're comfortable with that, okay, maybe no straws after that. Let me just switch off my appliance. So there's a lot of things that you can do that doesn't affect your pocket. Because I know to be really environmentally friendly, like it is expensive, but they are the basics that everyone can do that doesn't really cost them much. So definitely good points about being environmentally conscious.
Yes, I agree. I've also looked into the different options, and like you said, it's very expensive. And there's also there's this whole stigma around the people that are environmentally conscious, about some of them being judgmental because this person doesn't do this and they do that, So honestly, similar to what we said previously, it's just your own mindset. Stick to your own lane, figure out what you want to do, what your goal is. Doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be this massive thing, but small changes help.
Yeah, because I have seen this meme on social media. They said that you don't need a few people to be perfectly environmentally conscious, doing everything environment consciously, but we need like everyone that is doing and being environmentally conscious imperfectly. So even if few people are being buying expensive products that are environmentally friendly, and then there's like other people who are just doing the basic like no plastic bags at shops, that's still a huge difference because it all adds up at the end of the day.
Yes, exactly. I think that's very important. It's such a great mindset that to have, that we all actually can collectively work together. It's always interesting for me to see, if you watch movies and things, where there's some or other villain or some or other person who's like the head of everything, and then they're always scared, oh, the masses just mustn't find out because the masses can overthrow one person. And it's similar with this. If the masses just work together, then we can definitely change a lot of things. And there's even things like microplastics, just getting a face wash that doesn't have microplastics. The problem with that is currently we're finding microplastics in fish. So you might think, okay, I'm washing my face with this. It works really nicely. The product's great. But at the end of the day, you're going to end up eating that microplastic in a fish. And it's also possibly been linked to cancer. So, at the end of the day, you're also just harming yourself.
It's quite scary, like how plastic is everywhere. But like again, like we said, like whoever's watching this, they can just start off small and things that don't cost them money because being environment friendly can be expensive. So especially when you're doing it like buying all the wooden toothbrushes or the products for your house, but we can all start off small and just reducing where we can. And where do you think artificial photosynthesis can go? Do you think it can be a huge game changer for the environment once it's can go commercial?
So I'm not necessarily sure what the future will hold, but I do think the use of hydrogen, as a new biofuel, or not as a biofuel, as an alternative fuel, is going to go very far. If we already look at just what it's done in Europe in a few years, I mean, there's been so many fuel stations, hydrogen fuel stations popping up, car manufacturing companies making new cars running on hydrogen. The efficiencies are quite nice. So I definitely think hydrogen is the way of the future. It solves a lot of our current problems, with fossil fuels being such a big problem currently. And I know a lot of people are looking towards nuclear. I'm not particularly a fan of nuclear because I know of the negative effects it could have. So I definitely think it has its place, and I think it will eventually start being a bit of a game changer. Even if it doesn't necessarily get used for electricity, we can still use it at least for our cars.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation today. I think we covered quite a diverse number of topics today. But before we end the talk, I'm just going to ask you a few quick questions. So the first one is, can you just walk us through your routine? Like, because I want to know, like, whoever's watching, routine is important. So what is your routine to make it effective for your productivity or for your success?
Okay, so lately I've started using this app called Notion. So Notion is an online web-based organizing system, basically. I don't know if you've ever heard about the concept of a second brain. So a second brain is basically where you feed all of the information that's cluttering your brain. So if you need your daily schedule, whatever, you can put it onto Notion. Even if you're reading books and you want to categorize what you've read, if you read it on a Kindle, you can actually import that to Notion, and it organizes the notes that you've taken on the books in categories. So that's something I've been using. And then planning is very important, like you mentioned, having a daily planner. So mostly what I do is every Friday I'll take an hour and plan my week. Um, Not perfectly, just mainly what's happening every day, what I need to get done. Normally I'll set 5 goals for every day. I think 5 is realistic. It doesn't have to be big things. Maybe it can just be, today I want to drink 2 liters of water because that's very difficult, keeping small diaries, because I also first tried to make a large change there and it failed miserably.
Mm.
So keeping track of how much water I drink, how much sleep I get, and then just writing down 5 little things that I want to do or accomplish every day. And at the end of the day, this is very, very important for me, is thinking about or writing down 3 things that I'm grateful for. So you're not allowed to say the same thing twice. So at the beginning, it's basic. You might be grateful for your bed, for your parents. And then
Hi.
at the end of the day, you start getting grateful for things like your lungs working or fresh air. So yes, that's what I normally do for my weekly schedules.
Thank you so much again for coming on to figuring out the ordinary.
It's a huge pleasure. I really like your channel, and you really have some interesting topics going on.
Thank you so much.